Welcome, Seeker, to Mystic Praxis, a charming podcast at the crossroads where the eclectic meets the divine. Join us as we play with integrating spiritual pathmaking and modern culture to make our everyday lives more mindful, mystical, and magical, and to share what we learn along the way. Whether you're a longtime skeptic or down for some full-on witchy woo-woo, this lo-fi, high-vibe series has got you covered. Hey Seekers and Skeptics, it's Alia, and I'm back with another episode of Mystic Praxis, the podcast where we explore making magic in real life. Turns out today is a new moon, which is a perfect time to be starting new projects and getting into new fun stuff. So it's a perfect time for me to be finishing up recording this episode and sending it out into the world. And I think it's also appropriate, the topic of the podcast, because what I'm going to share with you is what I learned from the tarot cards when I asked them how we should be preparing ourselves for a post-pandemic world. And I think some of it is pretty inspiring. Now, when I listened back to this episode and listen to the results of the reading, I'm excited to share that with you. But what I also realized is that I kind of ran slapdash straight through an overview of the tarot, and it might have been a little bit of a bumpy ride. So that's okay. Just relax, enjoy the reading, and I promise, pinky swear on a new moon, so you know it's a big deal, that I'll come back to you with a little bit more in-depth description of how tarot works and how you might use it and how you might learn it and use it for fun projects and experiments all of your own. So with that in mind, please enjoy. There will be no tests at the end of this experiment. Be well. Hey Seekers, for tonight's episode, I thought I would do something a little bit different, which is I'm going to do a tarot reading for you all. So the reason why this is going to be an experiment is because my experience with tarot is that it is a very visual experience, but I'm going to try and make it an audio experience for you as well. I will also post some pictures up on the Instagram when we are done here so that you can kind of see what I see. So a little bit of background. The tarot refers to a divination system, typically that uses cards, 78 cards to be exact, a setup fairly similar to playing cards that we're used to playing Texas Hold'em poker with and stuff. So playing cards, you may be familiar, have 4 suits. Tarot cards also have 4 suits, but the 4 suits of the tarot are swords or daggers, pentacles or coins, wands, and cups. And so there's actually a correspondence to the playing cards. You could try and use playing cards to do things similarly to what you do with tarot cards. But tarot cards are a little bit different. In addition to the numbered cards within the 4 suits, which are usually referred to as the minor arcana, the tarot cards also have a set of symbols that are very juicy archetypes, numbered from 0 to 21. That are the major arcana. That is how they're described, and that's how we get to 78. There's also 4 extra cards in the minor arcana that are different than playing cards because the court cards in playing cards will have Jack, Queen, King, And in the tarot cards, or at least the ones that are based on the Rider-Waite-Smith system, which is what a lot of the popular decks you'll find in bookstores and metaphysical stores are based on, they have, in addition to jacks, queens, and kings, they have pages and knights, or princes and princesses, as well as queens and kings. So what I thought I would do tonight is I'm using a fresh deck. I have never used this deck for a reading before, but it is a beautiful deck called the Textured Tarot. The artist is Lisa McLoughlin, and I got this deck from an online seller that specializes in indie or very artsy decks called Phoenix and Lotus. Thank you so much. I've gotten a couple decks from them, and they're all always gorgeous. And what I wanted to think about, I'm going to shuffle a little bit so you're going to hear some fun noise in the background. Ooh, they're stiff. That's how you know they have not been broken in, so they are. Shuffling is going to be fun. So it is mid-May in the year 2020 while I'm recording this. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I personally have been at home for about 2 months, I would say, leaving very rarely, not really going anywhere other than taking walks around the block. I did leave the house this weekend for the first time in a few weeks, and it was kind of eerie. And while different states in the United States are opening back up, and folks are kind of wishfully thinking that it's all over and folks are recovering, to me it feels like, my experience at least, we're about halfway through this. And there has been some life stuff that has happened, as well as the pandemic stuff. I know a number of people who have been personally affected, and yet life goes on, meaning even though this sort of world-changing event is happening, everyone's lives are carrying on in some form or fashion. And a few friends and I were talking about, well, a lot of us are kind of getting used to the current situation where we're social distancing and we're socializing on Zoom, and man, a lot of people spending a lot of time on Facebook and such. How do we prepare to come out of this? Because it feels like we're going to be headed into a new world, if you will, a new reality. And so what is that going to look like? The other thing is that in addition to sort of the fun, spiritual, mystical, magical experiments I've been doing, I have been training to be a yoga teacher, and I'm really interested in therapeutic applications of different healing modalities, many of which use movement in them. And some of these healing modalities I think are going to be really necessary given the state of everyone's spiritual and psychological health during this situation and coming out of it. So I'm really kind of interested in thinking about how to prepare for what is to come, and that is something that maybe we can get some insight from the cards into. And so that is what I am thinking about doing for tonight's reading. And so I'm shuffling the cards with intention because I'm keen to figure out for myself and for you all if there is anything in particular that I or we can do to prepare, or any lessons that we might hear in what comes up in the cards, anything that can resonate. So I'm sorry the shuffling is taking so long, but these cards are super stiff. So I'm hoping that by the time I have shuffled them about a dozen times, that when I do the card draws, I don't get like the 2, 3, and 4 of cups in a row, I like to have a little bit of randomness here. So maybe what I'll do is, in addition to shuffling, I will cut the cards and pull from different spots in the deck. Okay, so what I've got in front of me laid out is a beautiful scarf that a friend of mine gifted to me. It's not an altar cloth by any means, but I love my friend. It's her birthday today, actually. Happy birthday, nameless friend, who maybe will listen to this later. This is the, I'm using the scarf you got me. I can't go out right now, but I can use your scarf in this situation. So it's this beautiful black scarf. There are white daggers embroidered on it, so it's appropriately spooky for a tarot reading. And what I'm going to do is a modified version of a 3-card draw. 3-card draws usually will do kind of a past, present, and future kind of download for you based on whatever question is being asked. So I was thinking beforehand, and the 3 positions, 1, 2, and 3 will be, position 1 will be, what did we carry into this situation for us that might no longer be serving us? The second position will be, what strengths do we need to rely on while we're here? And the third position will be, what should we focus our attention on to prepare for what is next? And then I like to also pull a 4th card just in case there's any positive messages from Spirit that might want to come through. And now let's take a real quick break. Be back soon with the reading. What's up, Mystics? It is awesome that you have joined us for this episode of Mystic Praxis. We would love it if you would subscribe and join us as we bridge many worlds in our explorations and play in all things mystical. You can find us via our RSS feed, which is hosted by Libsyn. You can also find us everywhere you find fine podcasts, such as Apple, Google, Stitcher, and Spotify. And we would also love it if you get the time, if you want to drop us a line, you can email us at mysticpraxis@gmail.com. You can also find us online at mysticpraxis.com and on Instagram and Twitter. I'm just going to sort of pull through and see what card is speaking to me for our first position, which is what did we carry in with us, which may no longer be serving us. And the card we got is the Queen of Swords. For position number 2, what strengths do we need to rely on while we're here? The King of Swords. Oh, that is ridiculous. Okay. I pulled from a different place in the deck, but okay. And then what should we, position number 3, what should we focus our attention on to prepare for what is next? Okay, I'm pulling from an entirely different place in the deck. Oh my gosh. And oh wow. Okay, we get the Magician in position number 3. And then a completely different place in the deck that I so carefully shuffled. A helpful message from Spirit. Let's see what comes through. And we have got the 7 of Cups. Okay. So let's talk a little bit again about what showed up in each position. I'm going to describe to you what this beautiful card looks like, as well as a little bit about what it could mean given the position that it's in. So the first position is, what did we carry into this situation with us that might no longer be serving us? And this is the Queen of Swords. And this is, wow, this deck is really beautiful. So the Queen of Swords is seated. She is wearing all white. She looks like maybe a little bit older woman, very strong and confident. She's holding a sword. It looks like, I'm not sure if those are no, they're not magnolias, but they are white, beautiful white flowers sort of around her. So, and the background it's a very icy background that she's in. She looks almost like a queen seated on a glacier or some sort of icy throne. And then in the distance, In contrast, you see a flamingo, and sort of above her and to the right, you see butterflies and what looks like maybe a crow flying in the opposite direction. So the Queen of Swords, first of all, the suit of swords is often associated with intellect and communication. So this Queen of Swords is an intellectual. You might, if you are familiar with Greek gods and goddesses, the Queen of Swords might be our Athena card. So the Queen of Swords, I would think, is very strong, very discerning, maybe a little bit judgmental though. So I almost feel like, what did we carry in with us? For me personally, I know that in my day job, I rely on a lot of analytics and such. So maybe part of what this is saying is what we have carried into this situation with us is sort of a reliance on the intellectual. I can see how that might be something that disappoints us in this situation, because when you rely overly on your analytical capabilities, you feel out of control when things don't go according to plan. And oh my goodness, I don't think very many people were planning for a pandemic this year. So I think sort of what this is referring to is kind of the cold judgment that comes with the discernment and intellect of the Queen of Swords. And I also think that given the realities of social distancing, if indeed you are practicing social distancing, there's sort of a loneliness associated with the Queen of Swords that I think maybe this card is inviting us to consider how to warm things up a little bit, and think about, in this icy background, our flamingo and our butterflies here, and even the crow that's off flying in the distance, representing transformation and change, and how can we harness what we have, but then also adopt new practices that serve us. So that is our friend, the Queen of Swords. Now in the second position, so interestingly, her husband or brother or friend, the King of Swords, was the next one selected for position number 2. What strengths do we need to rely on while we're here? And we have the King of Swords. So the King of Swords is not in an icy background here, but sort of a similarly it sort of feels cool, a very airy, lots of clouds, stone. The King of Swords is a very dapper gentleman wearing a red suit. It looks like sort of peacock pattern woven in there, and he has a prosthetic lower leg on one side, but he looks very balanced and strong. He has what looks like a peregrine falcon on one shoulder and an owl on the other, and also has butterflies flying around, not above him, but sort of around him, and there are 2 what look like crows or ravens flying above him, and there is a very sustainable windmill pictured here with him, probably representing again that airiness of the swords. So the King of Swords, again, like the Queen of Swords, is sort of an intellectual powerhouse, but generally I think with the King of Swords there is a little bit more of with the Queen of Swords, there's more of a sort of a justice element to her, but with the King of Swords, there's more of a protector, familial kind of feeling associated with him and with this card. So I think what that's saying is that, just trying to be practical and pragmatic and make sense of what can be done in this situation is strengths that we have that we are sort of relying on. It's not business as usual, but within each of us there is a sort of a deep reserve that we can tap into, that sort of steely core that's within so many of us. And I also think that this is the King of Swords is saying, it's really easy to get caught up in the fear and negative emotions of a situation like this. But the sort of best way to approach this is maybe simply to be practical, and that instinct that we have to care for others in our lives is something that can drive us, as opposed to being overly concerned with the sort of emotional intensity of the situation. So an interesting pairing of two of the court cards from the swords suits, kind of surrounding what's happening right now with there's so much emotion and physical change, and both of these cards are very intellectual, thinky cards. But then we come to the third card in this draw, which is where should we focus our attention to prepare for what is next. And the card that's come up is the Magician. So the Magician, again, another really beautiful card. This artist is fantastic. So this Magician card, in most Rider-Waite-Smith decks, you will see the Magician. The Magician is facing you with a right hand raised and a wand in one hand, and the other hand sort of reaching down to a table in front of him or her that has other magical tools on it, including a sword, a pentacle, and a cup or chalice. So if you are familiar with tarot, of course, you know that those four magical tools are also the four suits. And so the Magician is a manifester. The Magician is the one who is able to convert the power of the universe, his or her own personal power, into something that is manifested. The Magician harnesses magic. The Magician harnesses science in order to do the will of the Magician. And so, and just to give you kind of a physical, a little more about what the card physically looks like. So this Magician is on a sort of neutral, but a little bit lush, sort of greenish background. It looks like there are some poppies and other flowers. Maybe that's a lily sort of gently in the background. So some sort of a vegetative background, but lush. The table in front of the Magician is turquoise. It has a pentacle, a chalice, a wand, and maybe a candle holder or feather on it. And the Magician is wearing a very saucy top hat that has the sort of infinity symbol, the lemniscate, which is the infinity symbol, sort of saucily at an angle on that top hat, and the robes of the Magician, who has kind of an androgynous Bowie look about their person. Is wearing sort of like a tapestry like robe of brown and red, and there's an ace of diamonds sticking out of the pocket of the jacket / robe, and some really funky yellow boots that are sort of like lace up but kind of look like, I don't know, something you'd wear hiking in the Himalayas if you were in the 1800s. Anyway, this is a very funky Magician card, and this is about where should we focus our attention to prepare for what's next. And I mean, for me, you can't get a better card than the Magician when you're talking about where to go with what's next, because this basically is saying, well, we should focus our attention on what it is that we will, because we have the power to manifest that. And I feel like what this is speaking to is this idea that none of us really know what the new normal is going to be like when we get out of this pandemic. But we have the opportunity to shape it. We have the opportunity to take some of the learnings from this situation and apply them moving forward. For example, I assume most people are going to have like a separate closet where they keep toilet paper and shelf-stable food and hand sanitizer. But moreover, I think that I've heard a lot of nice stories about folks who have found new ways to connect with their family, new ways to connect with nature, using the technology that's kind of been holding us hostage in many ways for the past few years, holding our attention, our intentions hostage, finding a way to use it in order to really connect with other folks or to disconnect from that technology when they have other priorities. So this I think, is a really hopeful card for the future. Now, I did ask for one last message from Spirit. And the card that came up as that last message from Spirit is the Seven of Cups. So let's start with what this card looks like, because I'm still sort of processing what I think it means in this context. So the card is sort of a turquoisey background, and you can see sort of lightly some what looks like maybe sort of sacred geometry in gold woven on this abstract background. There's some clouds, and you have, as written on the tin, 7 cups. So 6 of the cups are upright. There's 3 on the bottom. There's 1 facing down that's on that sort of second row, and then there's 3 additional cups that are sort of floating above. So it's 3, 1, 3. Right side up, upside down, right side up. And then the cups are superimposed over a tower of cards, a house of cards, if you were, that are sort of shaped in a pyramid fashion. Now, the 7 of Cups in a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, that picture is usually of someone looking at these cups kind of floating in the air, and each of the cups has a different dream or vice or aspiration or wish in them. And generally, the 7 of Cups it's about not getting distracted by the fantasy. So I think that the 7 of Cups is sort of very connected to what I'm feeling from the Magician. If what we're talking about with the hope for the future is that we have the opportunity to manifest our will, we just have to figure out what our will is. The 7 of Cups is a helpful reminder that it isn't all about figuring out what it is that we wish for. It's also about taking the practical steps, some of that strength perhaps from our King of Swords present. It's about taking practical steps to actually go after something. The other thing about the 7 of Cups is this idea that if you are staring at 7 beautiful futures, you can kind of get caught up in the choosing and never actually pick a path and go for it. So I think this is a reminder that we do have an option to influence what the new normal is going to look like, but we can't allow ourselves to sort of be distracted and overwhelmed by all of the opportunities. We need to both sort of, figure out what our options are, then choose one and actually do the work to get the thing. So, in summary, it feels like what I learned from this reading is that this situation has been really tough on so many of us emotionally. And that's a situation that maybe we haven't had exactly the right tools and practice for in the past. The Queen of Swords kind of reminds us that, we might over-rely on our analytical capabilities in order to avoid feeling the feels that need to be felt in situations like this. While the King of Swords sort of reminds us that thinking side of us is also a strength in this situation if it gives us pragmatic tools in order to do the things that must be done. And then the Magician gives us a really clear insight into what the opportunity is next, which is to sort of choose our own adventure, but not like the Seven of Cups kind of gently reminds us to allow ourselves to be completely entranced by all of the options so that we forget to actually, manifest the thing. Well, I hope that this has been sort of an interesting walkthrough for you. This deck is really cool, so although it is still stiff and not completely broken in, I will be taking care of that in the near future. And if you enjoyed this little tarot reading and talk through, I'm happy to do more of these. I really kind of got into my mystical explorations through the tarot. I find it a really interesting system of symbology and stories, and so I think it's it provides a really interesting mirror for those who want to look. Even if you don't believe that it is spirit speaking to you, it's still a really interesting system just to kind of try and explore your own emotions or thinkings or experience through archetypes and mythology and such. So, anywho, I hope you enjoyed that, and let me know if you want more of them, and hope you have a happy week or weekend whenever you're listening to this. I hope you have a great day. Anyway, take care of yourself. Much love. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Mystic Praxis, and we would love it if you would hit subscribe wherever you found us, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, or straight from our RSS feed at mysticpraxis.com. Don't forget, you can also give us feedback and find us live on your favorite social platforms. We are Mystic Praxis on both Twitter and Instagram, and you can email us at mysticpraxis@gmail.com. Now go out there, make some magic, and we will see you soon.